Welcome everybody to another edition of Inside Guns with your host, me, the Yankee Marshal. Today I want to talk about one of the stupidest things I've ever heard come out of an anti-gunner's mouth. And it's not really the stupidest because they've said some pretty stupid things, but it's up there. I was reading the transcripts today from something Lawrence O'Donnell said yesterday. And Lawrence O'Donnell says some pretty stupid things all the time, but this one kind of takes the cake. He was referring to the shooting of the 16-year-old girl in Columbus, Ohio by police. You know, the girl that was actively trying to murder multiple people and had a history of violence, according to many of the people who know her. You know, when the police stopped her from committing murder, and by the way, if you want to know how I stand on that, I'm in support of the police on this one. But Lawrence O'Donnell, since he couldn't defend the girl, and I'm guessing this is where he's coming from, since he couldn't come up with a credible defense of the girl that people would go, yeah, you're right about, because it appeared like she was kind of a monster, at least from what we know so far, he decided to go after the tactics of the police who shot her, saying, why don't they just shoot to wound? Why are these officers shooting to kill? Why don't we teach them to shoot in the legs? And I just want to say that is one of the stupidest things I've ever heard. And you know, I occasionally hear it inside the gun community, the Second Amendment community, about when you draw your weapon, sometimes maybe you should shoot to wound instead of shoot to kill. And I want to talk about why that's so stupid. When you draw your weapon, whether you're a police officer or a regular everyday Joe, it should be under dire circumstances. It should be under threats of serious bodily harm, no other time. Now, I'm not going to say every time you draw your weapon, you shoot your weapon, but if you draw it, it should be very clear that you are in danger. And if you actually have to fire, you don't fire to wound. If someone's presenting enough of a threat to you that it justifies drawing a deadly weapon, pointing a deadly weapon at them, and then pulling the trigger, you don't shoot to wound. Because if you can shoot to wound, well, then you're not in danger enough to need to be pulling your gun anyway, or firing your gun anyway. That's not something we should promote. People pulling their gun and pulling the trigger when it's a situation where I'm justified in wounding them, but not in shooting them to stop them completely. Because here's the thing, shooting to wound someone, they'd have shot that girl in the leg that was trying to stab the girl. She might have stabbed the girl in the eye 2 or 3 times before she even noticed she shot in the leg. She was hyped up on adrenaline. She could have stabbed that girl and 2 other people before shooting her in the leg stopped her. Same thing with tasers. That's why I don't believe that police should be required to use a taser before they use their gun. Tasers are often ineffective. So if you're in a situation that warrants you drawing your gun and then warrants you firing your gun, you should be warranted in stopping that person permanently, because it should be you or them. In the case of the police, it should be that person, the police officer, or another innocent person, like it was in this case. You don't shoot to wound. Because if you start saying that it's okay for officers to start shooting to wound, even if you don't say it's okay for me as a civilian, which, believe me, we would be roasted in court if we shot to wound anybody. But if you start saying, well, police officers are trained to shoot to wound, they'll be able to start pulling their guns and shooting anytime they want. Just say, well, I wasn't using deadly force. I was shooting them in the leg. I just crippled them for the rest of their life. Oh, and yeah, a lot of those people we shoot to wound probably will die. But that wasn't our intention because we're trained to shoot to wound. So you'd make a bad situation where we're having too many people shot by police as it is worse, because you'd basically be saying, hey, now you can shoot under a lot less dire circumstances. Now you can shoot if you just think it will stop the situation. Doesn't have to be a deadly force situation. Doesn't have to be a potentially deadly situation. Just has to be a situation where you feel like, hey, if I shot him in the leg, it'd be a lot easier to deal with, or I could probably stop him from getting away or doing a crime. And then you'd have far more people dying from bullet wounds, because shooting someone in the leg is no guarantee you're not going to seriously injure them or kill them. People die from getting shot in the legs. People die from getting shot in the arm. So that whole notion, shoot to wound, is so stupid. And I don't want that thinking to infect anyone in the Second Amendment community to start thinking, well, maybe I should shoot to wound first. No. If you're justified in drawing your weapon, it should be a situation where you are potentially in serious danger of physical harm. If you're justified in pulling the trigger, it should be you or them. You should have the potential to be killed by that person. Doesn't mean that they have to be directly trying to kill you, but you should be in a situation where there is potential that you lose your life or be crippled or something else if you don't fire. If we start saying you can just fire to dissuade them or injure them so they run away, that creates a standard that no one should be supporting. So, Lawrence O'Donnell, are you really that stupid? Do you really think, since you're already upset about police officers going around shooting people and shooting this 16-year-old girl who was apparently a potential killer, do you really want to give them a license to shoot more often? I don't think you do. So maybe you should think about what you say. And to people out there in the Second Amendment community, ignore this garbage. Ignore this, you got to have less than lethal first, or you got to shoot to wound, because it's garbage. It's going to set you up in a situation where either you act before you should act because you think there's a lot of steps in between when there shouldn't be, or it's going to put you in a situation where you should act and you're going to try other options first and get yourself killed because you think, oh, there's these other things I got to do first, like less than lethal and shoot to wound, or less lethal, as some people want to call it, or shoot to wound and then deadly force. No, you don't want to have all those things in your way. You don't even want to have them as options because it creates bad situations for not only you, but the other person. And you also don't want them to be stumbling blocks that you trip over on the way to defend yourself. Same thing with police and citizens. And like I said, if they draw their weapon, it better be a life or death situation as far as I'm concerned with police. It should be a situation where someone is in serious risk. You pull over someone who's been cashed a bad check or wrote a bad check. You don't draw your weapons on that person, period. That should be the rule. You don't draw your weapon until someone presents a threat. And if they say, well, that puts them at too much of a disadvantage if they wait till there's a threat, that's their fucking job, to take that risk and to be able to be trained to deal with it quickly if it happens, if someone becomes a risk. That's why they usually have more than one officer. Because if a bad guy tries something with more than one officer, he's at a severe disadvantage. Even if he does suddenly present as a threat, he has to present as a threat to two different perspectives at least before he has any chance of being successful. So as long as cops are doing their job and paying attention to the people they're dealing with and dealing with it appropriately and de-escalating appropriately, these situations will be rare. But when they blaze in guns drawn, they create situations. And when you say, well, they can just shoot to wound, well, then you give them a greater leeway for drawing their weapons. You give them more latitude as to whether the shooting was actually justified. If they just shoot to wound, they weren't trying to use deadly force, like I said already. So think these things through, Lawrence O'Donnell, because they don't make any sense. It's just a really stupid thing to say, and I hope nobody pays attention to it. All right, everybody, I want to move on to my favorite part of the show, gun talk. And today, I want to answer a question from a viewer regarding what is the best production 1911? They actually asked more than one question in this email they sent me. They basically want to know what is the best production 1911, not getting into the custom makers like Nighthawk, etc. And which one of those makers, that is the best apparently, offers the most diverse line. The best options. Well, I don't think that that's going to be the same company, because they were kind of assuming that it would be the same company. I think the company that offers the most diverse lineup and who makes the best production 1911 are different companies. But both companies do both of those things well. It's just that one is better at a diverse lineup and one makes a better gun. And I think you know what I'm talking about here. First off, the most diverse lineup, the maker that produces something for everybody, as far as I'm concerned, is Kimber. Now, I know a lot of people don't like Kimber. They're like, oh, I don't like Kimbers. Blah, blah, blah. Most people base that on their own lack of knowledge and anecdotes they've heard on the internet from someone who had a bad Kimber. Well, I'm not saying people don't get bad Kimbers, but here's the thing. People get bad Colts. People get bad Smith & Wessons. People get bad SIGs. It happens. And Kimber sells more 1911s than all those other people put together. So every time you hear about someone who had a bad SIG or had a bad Colt or had a bad this or a bad that, you ought to hear 3 times where someone had a bad Kimber, because they sell way more. If a company sells 10 times as many of an item and has twice as many complaints as their competitor, well, that means they're doing a lot better, because their complaints are coming in at 1/5 the rate of their competitors. And that's Kimber. Kimber makes a very diverse line with lots of different options, lots of different features, lots of different styles. If you're looking to have a manufacturer that makes a great product and has a lineup where you'll find something you want, Kimber's where you should look as far as I'm concerned. Now, as far as the overall best production 1911, well, that's going to Dan Wesson. Dan Wesson makes an awesome 1911, just like they make an awesome revolver. I've always said their revolver, straddles the line between high-end custom guns like Korth and Smith & Wesson and Colt. The Dan Wesson is kind of like right in the middle of those two ranges. Same thing with the Dan Wesson 1911s. They're above the other production 1911s and just barely below the custom guns. And in some cases, not much below the custom guns. So if you're looking for a great 1911 and you just want one of the best ones you can buy without going the custom route, something you can find on the shelf at your local shop, well, you can find custom guns too, but they're going to be a lot more expensive. You can get the Dan Wessons for a third the cost sometimes as the higher end production guns. And they're only like, usually 50% more, if that, 20 to 50% more than the production guns, the regular production guns. And sometimes they're the same price, depends on what models you're looking at. So if you want the best 1911 you can get without going custom, Dan Wesson all the way. If you want a company that makes a great 1911 and will have every variation you can possibly think of, every style, every look, every option, Kimber would be your way to go. If you go with either of those guns, you're going to be very happy. All right, everybody, we are to the end of the show, and I want to end it as usual with our viewer EDC of the day. And today's going to be a little tricky because the person did not include their name, so I'm going to call them Pat, and you'll see why here in a moment. Now, Pat is carrying their Kimber K6S in a cross-draw holster. That's one of the reasons I wanted to show this picture so badly, is because you don't see a lot of people carry cross-draw. I'm a big fan of cross-draw. Back when I used to shoot SAS, I carried one strong side holster, one cross-draw holster. If you're shooting strong hand, cross-draw is a great way to go with your second gun. It's also a great way to carry because it is a very comfortable way to carry. You do run some risks with cross-draw. You don't run with other methods of carry, but as long as you're careful, and this is a revolver, you're going to be pretty safe. I like cross-draw, and I also like the Kimber K6S, awesome gun. So I really approve of the way they are carrying. And as you notice, I'm saying they, them, instead of him, her, because I'm not sure the pronouns for this person. This is the part of the show where I would normally start to make fun of them, even though I like their gun and the way they're carrying. But I'm actually kind of afraid to, because I'm afraid I might get accused of a hate crime. Because I'm not sure if this is a man or a woman or a neither of, neither of the above. I just can't tell. There's no face. They didn't give their name. That's why I'm calling him Pat. I look at the picture and there's clues. There are very feminine hips here. This is a very feminine shape. But a lot of my male viewers have very feminine hips. I hate to break it to you. I hate to break it to them. And I think most of them know. That's something I've seen quite a bit with the viewer EDCs. I've got a lot of men out there. There's a lot of men out there with a lot of badunkadunk, if you know what I mean. They got a lot of junk in their trunk. Got a lot going on back there. So that's not a given that this is a female. And I try to look for, the absence or presence of boobs, but they're wearing a big baggy shirt. I can't really tell. But even that wouldn't say for sure because a lot of my male viewers have boobs. I'm not doing too bad myself. So that wouldn't tell me either. Now, I don't see any bulge in the pants. But once again, I think you know where I'm going with that. So there's no way for me to tell if this is a man or a woman. So now they do have some nice, really blue grips on their gun. They look like a Tiffany blue. So that made me think, well, maybe they are a woman. But I'm like, I like Tiffany blue. Who doesn't like Tiffany blue? It's pretty. In fact, my oldest son's favorite color is robin's egg blue, which is very similar. So I'm like, don't know if this is a man or woman. So in this case, I'm just going to say I like their setup. And when it comes to carry and everything else, I'm just going to say I respect your choices. All right, everybody, that's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you come back again tomorrow. Until then, I just want to sign off as usual by saying, as far as the state of the world today is concerned, it is what it is. But if we keep fighting the good fight for our rights in this country, we keep our heads about us, we ignore the fear mongers and the profiteers who just want to manipulate us and make us angry, if we ignore those people and continue to fight the good fight, what things will be in the future is better.